Good afternoon. Welcome back to Rio Grande Perspectives. My name is Chris. It is a very hot day, so please excuse all the sweatiness. I basically figured I need to do this today or not do it for a long time, just with my personal schedule. The other thing is I have a respiratory issue. I started making hay for the first time. And I got a lot of hay dust. I breathed it in and it's bugging me. So if I start coughing too much, I'll make some edits, but let's get on with it. My topic that I wanted to get into today, God willing, is how to read the Bible like an adult. We need to make sure that we are reading the Bible as we should, namely as adults who are feeling able to stand in our own 2 feet vis-a-vis God, and not being boxed in by the opinions and expectations of people around us. To get into this, I first wanted to look at some research done by Solomon Asch, and I will post some links to the work he's done. I'll be very brief here because I try to fit everything in around 20 minutes. So Solomon Asch was a social scientist who did a number of experiments back in the 1950s that revolved around the susceptibility that people have to the opinions of those around them. In other words, how likely people were to conform to majority opinions, or what they perceive to be majority opinions. So the gist of his experiments was to get the test subject into a room with other people who, unknown to him, were actors. And the group would be shown lines drawn on a paper, lines of different lengths. And the test subject was then, asked how long the lines were. All the people in this room, the test subject and the actors, were asked to give their opinion on which line was longest, which line was shortest, and the actors deliberately gave wrong answers. And then the real participant was then put into the social pressure to conform to the opinions of others. People don't like to look like the weirdo. They don't want to be thought of as incorrect by the people around them. And so to a startling degree, these test subjects conformed to the opinions of those around them, even when the lines were drawn in a way where it was bordering on the absurd. Like line A, let's say, was clearly the longest line, and B was not very, nowhere near even equal to it. And if the actors were saying, well, it looks like B is longer, they'd look at it and study the picture, and they'd say, yeah, B's the longest. And in a disturbing amount of cases, the actual test subject would conform to their opinions. As I said, I'll post links to this. These studies are very, very interesting, and God willing, in future episodes, I think I'll refer to more of this work done by Dr. Asch. I will do a brief summary here that I got from Wikipedia. It says that in the control group, with no pressure to conform to actors, the error rate on the critical stimuli was less than 0.7%. In the actor condition also, the majority of participants' responses remained correct at 64% of the time, but a sizable minority of responses conformed to the actor's incorrect answer, 35.7% of the time. The responses revealed strong individual differences. 12% of participants followed the group in nearly all the tests. 26% of the sample consistently defied majority opinion, with the rest conforming on some trials. An examination of all critical trials in the experimental group revealed that 1/3 of all responses were incorrect. These incorrect responses often matched the incorrect responses of the majority group, i.e. the actors. Overall, 74% of participants gave at least one incorrect answer out of the 12 critical trials. Regarding the study results, Asch stated that intelligent, well-meaning young people are willing to call white black is a matter of concern. Here are some interview responses. Participants' interview responses revealed a complex mixture of individual differences in subjects' reaction to the experimental situation, with distinct reactions linked to factors such as confidence, self-doubt, the desire to be normative, and resolving perceived confusion over the nature of the task. Asch's reports included interviews of a subject that remained independent and another that yielded. Each provided a descriptive account following disclosure of the true nature of the experiment. The independent subject said that he felt happy and relieved and added, "I do not deny that at times I had the feeling to go with it. I'll go along with the rest." At the other end of the spectrum, one yielding subject, who conformed in 11 of the 12 critical trials, said, "I suspected about the middle, but tried to push it out of my mind." Asch points out that although the yielding subject was suspicious, he was not sufficiently confident to go against the majority. Subjects who did not conform to the majority reacted either with confidence, they experienced conflict between their idea of the obvious answer and the group's incorrect answer, but stuck with their own answer, or were withdrawn. These latter subjects stuck with their perception but did not experience conflict in doing so. Some participants also exhibited doubt, responding in accordance with their perception, but questioning their own judgment, while nonetheless sticking to their correct response, expressing this as needing to behave as they had been asked to do in the task. Participants who conformed to the majority on at least 50% of trials reported reacting with what Asch called a distortion of perception. These participants, who made up a distinct minority, only 12 subjects, expressed the belief that the actors' answers were correct and were apparently unaware that the majority were giving incorrect answers. Among the other participants who yielded on some trials, most expressed what Asch termed distortion of judgment. These participants concluded, after a number of trials, that they must be wrongly interpreting the stimuli and that the majority must be right, leading them to answer with the majority. These individuals were characterized by low levels of confidence. The final group of participants, who yielded on at least some trials, exhibited a distortion of action. These subjects reported that they knew what the correct answer was, but conformed with the majority group simply because they didn't want to seem out of step by not going along with the rest. All conforming respondents underestimated the frequency with which they conformed to the majority. Very, very interesting things. This should give us a lot of pause and make us want to evaluate our own decision-making process. How often do we conform to what we hear other people saying, even if we know that it's not true or not likely to be true? And this is very important in reading the Bible like an adult. Something I wanted to share from my own experience was that when I moved out of the house and joined the military, I really got deeply into reading the Bible. It was something I wanted to do since I was much younger, and that feeling of, my parents never forbade me from reading the Bible. There wasn't any kind of pressure at home to not be interested in religion. It was just a different experience being away from home, being in a new environment, all new people. There were no social expectations. Nobody expected me to be the Chris that they always knew. Um, and that's very liberating. I think it's a very important part of our development. We have to be in a place in our life where we can just go out and be ourselves and not have to fit into any kind of mold. And so as I was reading the Bible, I didn't grow up churched. I had no sense of creeds or doctrines. I was just reading it like, some guy from nowhere, reading a book that was brand new to me. And so later on, and I loved it. I loved it. I thought the Bible was amazing. Everything I found in it made me want to continue. And when I was in the military, when I had time off, I would go outside the base. This would be in Oceanside, California. I was in the Marines. And the town there is just teeming with street preachers and, little shops where, it's really a front for ministry. They get you in there with, cookies or beverages, and you end up talking to somebody who happens to be a pastor, and they try to evangelize to you. And I went to all kinds of these things. I didn't favor any one group. I'm sure I know Calvary Chapel was very big there, as were many denominations. And, I would just compare things. I would hear people out. But I never felt like I had to go all in and say, well, these guys have it all figured out. I did think at the time, I thought that the Seventh-day Adventists were performing the best in regards to justifying many of their key doctrines based on arguments from the Bible. For example, Sabbath over Sunday, and a number of other things. But even then, I didn't feel like I didn't name myself a Seventh-day Adventist. I didn't feel any need to do that. Now, later on in life, this would be several years later, I was in a situation where I met this girl. We were getting married, and to get married in the church, we had to become officially church members. So we took a crash course in Seventh-day Adventism, and the pastor said, oh yeah, and here's the beliefs. We're going to go by all the, I think it's 27 key points in their creed, and the idea was that we would agree to all these 27 points in order to be baptized into the church as members who could then go on and get married. Well, as is the case in most Christian churches, it was either the first or the second item of their list of things in the creed was the Trinity. And this was the first time that I was ever confronted with the doctrine of the Trinity. Now, to be sure, there were many times in my life that I had heard of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But it never dawned on me. Again, I was not churched. I was not raised in church. It never dawned on me that people meant by this that they were all three facets or three persons of the same being, three persons of the same divine essence, or three parts of one God. How there are many ways to define the Trinity, as there are Christians, almost, it seems. So when I was confronted with this, and this pastor is telling me that, yeah, Jesus is God, and God is a triune being, I thought it was so wild. I thought it was wrong. And I'm not claiming that I was some saintly person, not at all. But I thought there was something very subversive about this. Now, later on in my life, I would come to understand an Islamic concept called fitra, which describes the sort of a God built, God created in us an innate orientation to certain very, very important fundamental truths, especially about God. And I think that's what was going on when I heard this man telling me that Jesus is God, and that obviously the implications there then that God died, or that God was walking around on the earth as a human being, and so on. I thought that it didn't sit well with me. I thought it was very disturbing. And I also had this deadline to get married. We had to keep things on a certain schedule. And so at the moment I said, I will sort of go along and get along, but I will come back to this. I'm going to figure this out because something about this seems so wrong. And so I made sort of like an internal vow in my head that even if I had to jump through a few hoops then, that I was committed to coming back and to studying this. And eventually that's what I did. Sometime after I got married, I just started college, and got through the fall semester, and we had the semester break. And I said, you know what? I'm going to get to the bottom of this. That's what I'm going to do with my semester break. I have no other goals, just this. Because even after that one, that initial experience of the shock of the Trinity, then what happens is, now that I was primed to notice things, I would run into different articles and run into, different Christians or websites or songs. And now it's like, oh wow, I'm seeing this all over the place. Yeah, this idea is not just this pastor's idea, but it seems like everybody I run into who's a Christian is believing in this. And I'm thinking, how could this be? Why would somebody believe in this stuff? So I was doubly determined to get to the bottom of it. And what happened is I had that time off. I was all alone in my apartment. This is back in, probably, I think it must have been 2002, so a good 23 years ago. There I was. I had my opportunity to dig into this, and I wanted it so badly. I wanted it so much. I wanted to know this truth, and I didn't care where it led me. I was already okay with being on my own. I was already okay with being the odd man. By this point, I lived a couple states away from my family. I had already lived independently. I didn't have any sense of expectations to conform to a family heritage. Our family was always Methodists or Catholics or anything. I didn't have any of that baggage. And I was willing to go wherever it leads. So I began my study with a very, very earnest prayer. And I prostrated myself, bowing my head to the ground. And I said, God, you made me, and you guide me, and I'm asking you to show me the truth about you. And if you show me that Judaism is the truth, I will go there. And if you show me that Islam is the truth, I will go there. And if you show me that Christianity is the truth, I'm asking you to sort this out, because this is a very confusing thing. And when I said that to God, I meant it. I was truly willing to go wherever it leads. And I got up from my prayer and I began my investigation. I see we're at the 20-minute time limit that as I've said before, I am not very tech savvy, and I have noticed that I run into problems if I let the videos get much over 20 minutes. So maybe we'll do this in 2 parts. And God willing, I'll see you on part B. Thanks a lot.